So hi everyone, my name is Janencia Wood. I am the Director of Alumni Inclusion and Events for those of you who are just joining for the first time. I'm really excited to welcome you on. And for those of you who are watching later on, thank you so much for doing that. Today I'm going to share with you some time with Jessica, and forgive me, I'm going to say it with my Spanish accent, so I apologize in advance, Battilana. How do you?
It's Battilana. Pretty
Battilana.
Close.
All right. I just put a little Latin
yeah, no, that's great. I love it.
And Jessica joins us from the class of 2000. So thank you so much for joining us.
Hard to believe. Like sands through the hourglass. We were just saying, I don't know where those 20 years went, but here we are.
You know, it's funny when you say it's been 20 years because even my own recollection, my daughter was born in 2000 and I know she's almost 20, but yet somehow it doesn't feel like that span of time.
No, it's weird. It's really weird. I don't like how people are talking about the 90s now like they're ancient history, you know?
This is such a good point.
It's very weird. And I had to tell somebody who Prince was the other day, you know, Prince, the musician Prince. Yeah. And I was like, this is not right.
That's not right. That person was living under a rock.
I think that person was just dumb. That didn't have to do with age. No.
So for those of you who are on the chat, please feel free to use that chat as we go throughout the conversation with Jessica. Ask whatever questions you are intrigued with and want to share with us. I am also going to post our Powered by page, which is where you can find all these programs and all the listings of activities that we're doing to try to keep everyone connected virtually during this very challenging time. And so with that, I also just want to invite our folks to share if you have an M&C, whether that is a traditional milk and cookie or if it's maybe something a little bit more adult. That's fine too.
C is for cocktails. I mean, it's cocktail hour here in California, so.
Oh my gosh, it is cocktail hours there. Yes. So I'm really excited. This is the first California guest we have. So
nice. All right.
Yeah, everybody else has been pretty much on the East Coast. So I'm happy to launch our first alum that doesn't work on campus. And you're in California. I feel like I'm hitting a lot of boxes here.
Yeah, there's a lot of us out here, actually. I'm sort of surprised, but I run into alums, you know, often, or, you know, learn that people that I know have some connection to the college, even out here, which is nice.
I love that. Okay, so Heather she's serious about her M&C cocktail game. She is now sharing with us this sugar cookie martini that she likes to drink during these M&Cs.
Wow, committed to the cause. I love it.
I love that. So Jessica, we're going to just jump in and just again, thank you so much for being here. And if you can quickly share your pronouns with us and tell us a little bit about yourself and perhaps what happened the last 20 years in some sort of
What happened the last 20 years?
What happened to those years?
What happened the last 20 hours? I don't even, so she, her pronouns, the last 20 years, I mean, honestly, so I graduated 2000, as you said, and then right after school, I moved to Boston. My wife, Sarah Picard's class of 99, so she was in Boston working, and I moved in with her, and we lived and worked in Boston for about 5 years, and I started almost immediately working kind of in the food industry. My mom was a great cook. I loved food. I had a history degree from Mount Holyoke with a focus on Chinese history, which is about as useful as it sounds. And sort of towards the end of my senior year, I got my advisor, who was John Lippman, who's now retired. He and I did a whole like independent study on Chinese food. Like I was just like obsessed. And I used to work at the art museum and like cater at the Mount Holyoke Art Museum, and I would cater events for them. I was the college kid that had like the subscription to Gourmet and Bon Appetit. And so the fact that I went on to do something in food is not terribly surprising. So I started working at this little specialty food shop that did a lot of direct imports from Europe. I did that for a number of years. And then I had also been working at a catering company on the side, and I got this opportunity to go and work at this cooking school in Burgundy, France.
Oh, I feel so bad for you.
I know. And I had studied French in school, so that was like, I did have some knowledge of the language. And I went there, and that sort of opened me up to the idea of doing more of the writing side of things. The cooking school is putting together a book, so there I learned how to like write recipes, how to develop recipes for how a book is put together. And I came back to Boston, and I sort of continued working the same sort of catering, like odd jobs, especially food shop jobs. And then it was actually a woman who was working at Yankee magazine, which is an write this story. And that was sort of my first kind of break, combining my interest in writing and my interest in food. And I think like sometimes people are like, oh, you're so lucky. You have the best job. You write cookbooks for a living. And I think like there was nothing lucky about it. It was like just a lot of persistence and a lot of work over a very long period of time. It was not like, I just published my first solo cookbook in 2018 when I was like 39 years old, and I had worked in the industry for, since college, basically. Yeah. But it was like, one thing sort of led to another, like the network in the food world, like the Alum Network, is small and pretty tight knit. And, you get to know people. So I did that for a number of years in Boston. And then my wife and I just were really eager to check out the West Coast. We were super curious about living in California. So we decided to move. She works in biotech, and California, San Francisco in particular is a great city to be for food and biotech. So we just left, and I had no job when we got here. And I eventually started working at Chez Panisse, working in their office. And I did that for a while, and then got a gig in the test kitchen at Sunset Magazine, which is sort of a storied West Coast magazine.
Right.
And I did that for a number of years, and then got a job working for a San Francisco City magazine called 7x7 as their restaurant editor. And that was sort of nice because at that point I was able to combine, I had cooked and I had written, but I hadn't really done much restaurant criticism. So I sort of added that to my, my skill set. And I left 7x7 and worked for a number of years for a digital media company called Tasting Table. And had a sort of rocky parting with Tasting Table that happened right around the time that our second son was born. Mm-hmm. And then I just decided, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to work for a company anymore. I want to work for myself. And sort of all along in the time we'd been in California, I was writing cookbooks with chefs out here. I was ghostwriting and co-authoring cookbooks. And I loved that. I loved the process of putting together cookbooks. And always at the back of my mind was this thought of wanting to do my own cookbook when, the dust sort of settled. And instead, I decided to do it when we had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. The dust had not settled at all. But I just felt like I didn't want to wait anymore. I know, it's just like, it's all so crazy. You might as well just, add another project. So that book was published by Little Brown. It's called Repertoire, and that came out in April of 2018. And I've gone on to do more of the same sort of stuff. I just finished co-authoring a baking book that will be out next fall. And I finished a proposal for a second book of my own that I'm hoping to sell. That was sort of before the world exploded, so I don't know. But I love this work. I feel like so fortunate to be able to do this work. And really, honestly, like, it is not the most lucrative line of work to be in. It is a great quality of life. But I'm also grateful to have a partner that has, what I call a real job. That has provided us with like a lot of stability over the years and allowed me to sort of, make money, not make money, pick projects I liked. That is a huge, huge privilege. So that's the nickel version of the last 20 years.
I love it. So I know that you were looking forward to celebrating a 20th anniversary or reunion year.
Yeah, I sure was. I'm so disappointed.
I know, and then life, the world erupted and we had to shift a little bit. But just thinking about all of the things that you've done, and it's pretty amazing. And I'm just wondering, in that journey, if you've kind of experienced anything specifically and uniquely to you as a woman in this kind of male-dominated field and what that was like.
Well, I think, everyone makes choices, right, about things. And for me, it was very clear early on that the life that I wanted, as far as like family and children was concerned, was not particularly conducive to working in a restaurant, which is what I sort of thought I might do. Um, and when I was first out of college, one of the books that I helped work on was with this restaurant called Number 9 Park in Boston. And the chef there is a woman. And I saw these like incredible sort of sacrifices that she had made to have this, to have a restaurant where she had to be there, all night, every night. And I thought like, that doesn't seem like a great fit. And I mean, in some ways that's why I sort of pivoted to, I love to write and I think I'm, talented at it, but I sort of made it, early decision to pivot to something that would allow me to have like a family and, and a career I love. And, there are plenty of successful female restaurateurs who also have children, but it's definitely more challenging. And yeah, I mean, and when I worked at the cooking school in Burgundy, for a 2-month period, we were sent out to restaurants to work, just to get some more industry experience. And, every like sexist thing that you can imagine or that you've read about happened, and thinking like, maybe not. Like it was everything from like the young male Japanese interns got like all the good jobs, and I would be like stuck with like a case of parsley, like 25 bunches of parsley to pick all the leaves off of. To the chef like trapping me in the walk-in and asking me to go out. It was just like the whole everything you sort of imagine about these like old school male-run kitchens, and I thought like. I mean, and unfortunately, it totally still happens. And I think, it's like this industry is in some ways no different than other industries, like where you see, a lot of the burden of sort of like child care often falls on, the female partner in a, heterosexual relationship. And I think, it's true in the restaurant and food industry too, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that is, I'm glad that you have made this career choice because I love your book. I love your recipes and your approach to them. So, I mean, as a complete nobody that doesn't understand anything in the kitchen, but I was able to follow your cookie recipe. So
I think, because I'd written all these chef cookbooks, and then when it came time to write my own book, I sort of felt like, people need like regular recipes. Like these chef recipes are lovely and interesting, and I enjoy reading them. But people just need to like be able to make food for the people that they care about, like day in, day out. I mean, especially now. I was like, I did some math recently about like 4 people in my household. 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We've been in sheltered in place in San Francisco for, I think today is the 60th day. It's a lot of goddamn dinners. I think the quote or the thing that I hear most often in the house is like, I'm hungry. My boys are 8, almost 9 and 6, and they're just always hungry, always asking me for food. Like, what are we having? Can I have a snack? And, there's a sort of relentlessness to it. Yeah. And I think when we had these little kids, this idea of this repertoire, like of sort of mastering 10 or 15 recipes that you could kind of make without thinking. Yes. It's sort of like the truth will set you free. Like if you learn these, like most people don't need more than 15 recipes. Like you can repeat things. Mm-hmm. You go out a few nights a week, or you have whatever you're at friends' houses or things like that. But if you can really drill down on some like recipes that your family loves, it's like a gift you give yourself over and over again. So I wrote the book very much with that in mind. Like, can stuff be made with regular ingredients? In a reasonable amount of time in a normal kitchen, and for the most part, I think, yes, there's like some sort of more special occasion things in there, but very few. Most of the stuff in the book is like intended to be cooked, every day.
By the everyday person.
Yeah, by the everyday person. And we eat those cookies a lot. That's probably the thing out of the book that we always have on hand. We always have them in the freezer.
Well, so along those lines, so you shared your cookie recipe with us, and thank you for that. And I'm wondering, do you prefer crispy or chewy cookies?
Oh, I like crispy edge, soft in the middle.
Well, that's
But, I have to say, with all due respect to Chef Jeff, I always found those cookies to be a little too raw for my taste.
Yeah.
But you know what? I know I may be in the minority because a lot of people really like them, but I like a crunchy edge. And it's two things. It's the bake on the cookies, if you really want to drill deep on this. The bake on the cookies is important, but also the size that you make the cookie ball. Because if you make it too big, like it's going to be, it's not going to work out.
It's not going to work. Exactly.
You want to say hi, son? My son just wants to say a quick hello to everyone.
What's your name?
My name is Vanessa. Yeah, there's a few of us on here.
So this is Sid, who is my 6-year-old.
Hello.
All right, let's move on.
So, Jessica, I have a good question from Perry about the local food scene. Perry shares with us that she's been enjoying, okay, I'm not going to say this correctly, Soleil Poe's presence in the Chronicle.
Oh, yeah, Soleil,
Soleil,
yeah.
thank you. She says, can you comment on the impact she's having in the food culture? It seems to reach well beyond San Francisco. Thank you for being a guest speaker. This is fascinating.
Yeah, Soleil was a great addition. I mean, frankly, her predecessor, Michael Bauer, had been so Soleil is the restaurant critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, where I also write a home cooking column. And her predecessor was a man named Michael Bauer, who was like very much like old guard.
Michael, yeah.
And frankly, his time had come. And he decided to finally retire. He sort of followed a very formulaic, very old school, sort of Eurocentric way of reviewing restaurants, which I think is like no longer actually very relevant at all. And so everyone was sort of wondering who they would hire for the position. And they had, of course, tons of applications. And they hired Soleil, who I actually, oddly, though we both write for the paper in the food section, I have not met in person, which I thought was like wonderful because she brings like a diverse, different voice. She grew up in a restaurant family. She's not white. She's not a man. And she's sort of looking at food and restaurants with, like with a social justice lens too. I mean, it's hard to write about food, I think, in, 2020 without considering all these other things. Mm-hmm. It's no longer just about like what sort of linens are on the table. And, that's just not enough. And so she gives a lot of interesting context and a lot of thought to the reviews. And she is, I think it's interesting because she certainly has like, Michael Bauer had a presence, a nationwide presence, but he wasn't very, very culturally relevant. And I think Soleil has like made the newspaper, she herself has, sort of made the Chronicle's food section much more nationally relevant. So I think it's great. And I think like, that's a criticism that's fairly leveled at food writing, that it's, predominantly white. And that's true, and it's going to remain true so long as the gatekeepers of some of the bigger publications, like, hire the way that they hire and amplify, the chefs and voices that they do. So it's wonderful that the Chronicle like opted not to do that, and to sort of hire somebody that would bring a new perspective.
That's amazing. I'll have to now follow that person because
she's great.
Being over here, the Chronicle is not known to me, so I'll have to check that out. So speaking of restaurants, though, this is kind of a fun question. What would you absolutely never order at a restaurant, and then why?
Oh, there's not much that I wouldn't order. I mean, I eat everything. I'm not allergic to anything. There isn't very much that I don't like. Oh, I know. You know what I don't really like, actually? I'm not crazy about sea urchin uni, which I know a lot of people love. I don't mind the flavor, but there's something about that texture that I find a little bit off-putting. So I would never order that. If I was served it, I would totally eat it. It would be fine, But as I've taught my children to say, they used to say like, oh, I don't like that, or yuck. And now I've trained them. So one thing that's really stuck, I've trained them to say, it's not my favorite. which I think is a much more diplomatic way of
I love that. It's not my
conveying your feeling. It's not my favorite. I mean, and that's fair. Like, right? Not everything can be your favorite, but just don't be a jerk about it.
I love that. That's great. I'll have to think about that. It's not my favorite.
It's not my favorite. Yeah.
As opposed to, it's not the best thing I've ever eaten.
Yeah.
So you've been doing a ton of cooking at home and you have very hungry people there. And I'm just wondering, what is your favorite thing to cook? Either for your family or for yourself?
That's a good question. I mean, I really like making fried rice. I make a lot of fried rice. There's a recipe in my book for hot dog fried rice, actually, which I suggest everyone try at least once. It's pretty great. So we make that often because everyone in the family really likes it, and it's a good way to use up all the like bits and bobs that collect in your crisper drawer, or like a little bit of protein that you have left over. Yeah, I find as long as you have like a few, like I always put scallions in mine and a scrambled egg, and I feel like if I have the scallions and the scrambled egg, like everything else is sort of like doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
So I like making that. I've actually, I mean, it has felt at times lately like a bit of a grind, even for me. But it has also sort of felt like this interesting challenge because I'm so accustomed. I mean, I live like a 4 or 5 minute walk from 3 or 4 different grocery stores. And I love going to the grocery store. I'm like the odd egg that really enjoys it and thinks it's like very soothing. Not now, but in our former lives. And so, we've been having all of our groceries delivered, which again is like an extraordinary privilege. But it also has like taken away a lot of the like, sort of joy of walking and choosing and shopping and going to the farmer's market and all the like the beloved rituals.
Yeah.
But it has caused me also to be like a much more, I guess like a smarter cook, because we're not like, if I've forgotten an ingredient, I'm not going to get it. So it's sort of this feeling of like, okay, well, what, like the challenge of like, what can I make with like this and this and this? Like, how can I, produce another lunch when it seems like we don't have anything in the pantry? And it's been like a good opportunity to clean out all the stuff that's like sits at the back of the cabinets, like the tiny, like the dregs of a bag of pasta, or like, like all those condiments that you buy and like need to use. So that I find that very satisfying, like emptying jars, emptying bags, like, really cleaning out. I have found some pretty weird stuff back there too, that I feel like, okay, if you haven't eaten it by now, like it's not happening. So.
That's really funny. I miss smelling. So I prepare food based on smell. It's really interesting. I don't know what to tell you. I can tell when my food is done based on its smell, not necessarily on texture or anything else I don't taste my food as I go. Anyway, so I miss going to the grocery store because I miss like picking up ingredients that smell fresh and like I can touch them and feel them and kind of make sure that they're at the perfect ripeness, if you will.
I know. I mean, I feel again, getting my groceries delivered to me, huge privilege.
Yes.
And I feel and being able to like pay for them all, is a huge privilege, but it is a drag sometimes. Like, I'm like, why did the Instacart shopper get like the, pineapple that's like not going to ripen for 2 months? Like, why? Like I wouldn't have picked that, like this tomato that's like a baseball or, but I guess like I sort of, you have to give up I'm not one to give up control, but you have to give up a certain amount of control.
Like a little bit.
Just a little.
I find that when I'm most offended, again, privileged, right? I order my groceries also and have them delivered. Most offended by underripe bananas. You brought me a pack of green, like hard green.
Well, you should consider yourself lucky because somebody posted the other day on my Instagram, they had ordered like 3 pounds of bananas. Instead, they got like 30 pounds. Like they got like a case of bananas delivered to their house.
Okay.
I have been getting, I think the nice thing too is that you are seeing things that I hope will persist after this. Like, we are getting a farm box from a farmer that typically only sells to restaurants, but he's had to pivot his business. We've gotten, meat and fish from places that typically only supply like industry trade. And I think like that, as we see like food systems like falling apart, you see like the reports of like the potatoes in Washington and the backups of the feedlots. you know, what that says to me is, I mean, there's so many things that are broken right now, but like that food system is broken. Like that is not an efficient way to feed, you know, people.
No.
Nor is it a responsible way to feed people. You know, and so you sort of think like, okay, maybe this is yet another sort of wake up call to change the way that we, you know, that we source food, and being able to buy it from the person that grows it, like for me feels like so great right now.
I agree with you, hands down. I will tell you, one of the things I miss is the farmer's market, right? We don't have access to direct food anymore. And we, you know, I live in Palmer. We're right around South Hadley. There's a lot of farms, local farms here. We buy eggs, we buy meat, you know. It's a really difficult moment to be in because you lose some of that ability to do that.
And did you know that Hadley is the asparagus capital of the world?
I did, but only because the Dining Commons, and Heather, keep me honest here, the Dining Commons has like a vegetable of the month every month, and it gives you like this quick little history around its most natural or best time for picking and all of this stuff, and it's like a local food harvest type of situation. It's great, but
remember I've been having asparagus when we were at Mount Holyoke.
There's a lot of asparagus now.
They cheated us. Well, maybe now that you have central dining, they've gotten fancy. We did have all the like freshly baked stuff, though. I mean, all the fresh bread and all the desserts and stuff, which is pretty remarkable. You know, that all that was baked on campus. Then maybe it's not.
We have fresh bread. Just Heather, tell me if so first she said I was correct on my quote there, which was good. But then she also said, definitely have no fresh bread. Baked goods.
Maybe I'm making this up. Did we? Bread. Somebody can fact check this after. This is like a Donald Trump presser. Like she was lying.
So Perry's asking, aside from ordering a CSA or using farmers market, are there steps we can take to help support independent farmers nationwide, given the supply chain issues and dumping? Great question, Perry. Thank you.
That is a great question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think in some ways the ship has sailed in terms of like these big farms. Like, I don't know that there's activations now to, you know, to change the fate of these crops that are being dumped. But I do think, you know, I mean, I think the CSAs for sure, but I also think like, I have noticed even at the bigger chains, like even at the Safeways here, that they're starting to bring in, you know, more local stuff, more stuff from smaller farms, because people are asking for it. And so I think that's like can be hugely impactful. You know, if people start asking for, like the Safeway near us used to be just sort of an ordinary grocery store, and now they stock all sorts of stuff that you would not, you know, expect to see. Almost some of the more specialty grocery items, and you know, they have lemongrass, and it's because people are asking for it. So I think that's sort of a larger scale way to do it. But yeah, I mean, I think anytime that you can sort of be cutting out the middlemen and women, you know, you're better off. So whether that's like, you know, buying direct meat, fish, produce, you know, you can buy grains from, you know, like lots of mail order sources for grains and beans and things like that. Like, so yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see the way that we, or at least, you know, some of the conscientious consumers change their approach to sourcing food.
So Lauren has a question. Maybe you could share your thoughts on it. She says, we're tired of dealing with grocery stores. How do you go about finding independent meat and dairy suppliers? Interesting. I mean,
that is interesting. You know, there have been, I don't know where you live, and in San Francisco, of course, San Francisco is like its own bubble as far as food is concerned, but there has been a pretty huge shift because the restaurants are terrified, right? Like, and so all of these big restaurants, small restaurants, have sort of tried to pivot to offer different things. And a lot of their suppliers have dovetailed onto that. So that's how I found out a lot about a lot of these things. Like some of my favorite restaurants are doing takeout, but also along with the takeout, they're doing, you know, a farm box. There's a company called 4starseafood.com that I know supplies the West Coast. It's meat. It's not just seafood. It is seafood. They have uni if you want it. It's seafood, it's meat, it's dairy, and they ship you can also pick up here in San Francisco. I would say, if you are if you're not living in the Bay Area and you want to do this, I would try reaching out to some of the restaurants in your community, some of the better restaurants, because they have a sense of like who they were buying from and, who might be in need of help. Then for like grains and stuff, there's Maine grains, like the state of Maine, MAINE grains. They ship flour and dried beans. And then out here, Rancho Gordo is an amazing dried bean company. And I mean, their stuff is a little bit more expensive, but it's also amazingly fresh. The grains are milled and then sent to you. The beans are haven't been in a silo for a million years. And you don't have to, you can buy a box of beans once every 6 months and have it shipped to you because it'll just, it'll be fine. So yeah, I would say poke around, ask, other people in the food industry, other restaurant people, and hopefully you'll find some gems in your own communities.
Lauren, question from here in M&C. So Lauren, if you send me an email at jwood@mtholyoke.edu, I can actually ask our Dining Commons director, because I know that they source local, and they source from local farms, including meats and dairy and everything that they possibly can. They're also green certified too, so they're pretty.
You guys could start doing Mount Holyoke CSA boxes.
Yeah, right.
It'd be awesome. Just like a bunch of Chef Jeff cookies in there. Some
perfect,
some
magical. I love that. So Jessica, I know we're running out of time, and they do over 20% local spend now. That's awesome. Which is great, and they continue to do some great things for us. So
this is my other kiddo who wanted to say hi. This is Ellis.
Hi, Ellis.
Will be turning 9 in June. Anything you want to say? See you later, alligator.
So, just as a fun departing thought, can you share with us something that you're reading right now?
Reading or eating?
Reading.
Oh, I'm like, reading, what's that?
Eating everything. We're eating everything. If it's anything like my house.
I'm embarrassed to say, I was actually just reading an article about how nobody has the attention span now to read anything, and I felt sort of relieved. I am reading the novel Pachinko, which is a big, thick one with tiny print. I should warn everyone. And in full disclosure, I read the first chapter. I was totally into it, and then I put it down for so long that I forgot what happened. So then I had to go back and start over again. But I have done that, and now I'm well on my way. And it's just a sort of amazing story about a Korean family through the generations. And the San Francisco Public Library, probably other libraries around the country, do this one city, one book, where they have, multiple copies, and they have some integrations with, Q&As with the authors and things. So I picked it up, not because of that, but it is a one city, one book. The other book that I just read is How to Write an Autobiography by Alexander Chi, who is Korean-American, who grew up in Maine and now is a professor or assistant professor of English at Dartmouth. And it's a book of short essays, which is like kind of my speed these days. And there's a lovely essay in the book about this apartment he lives in New York, and he plants all these roses outside of it. And he goes into such detail. It's like, like quarantine porn, I guess. Like he just goes into such detail about like being in his yard and what the roses smell like, and like what they all, and it was like, total armchair, armchair travel. Yeah.
I love that.
Those are the most recent things.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me. And I will forever remember that you said quarantine porn. So that I'm going to have to
not very good
that.
Quarantine porn.
I love that. No, I love it. So it says to Jess, Heather sending you a quick message saying, after MHC in grad school, I had a life change and ended up going to culinary school. Who knew that? I didn't know that. Heather. All right. At JWU, ended up a guard manager. Is that right?
Garde manger, yeah.
Thank you. In a 600-seat Italian restaurant for a while before a 6-day week, 15-hour shifts day started to wear me down.
Yeah,
I was
right.
getting the writing aspect instead. Well,
Yeah.
fun little fun fact from Heather. That's great. I didn't know that, Heather, and I love that even more. So, Jessica, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you all for being on the webinar with us. This was fantastic. I know we could have gone another hour, but I know it's also dinner time in California.
It's dinner time in California. Yeah, the natives are probably going to get restless.
Exactly.
It was so lovely. And, if anyone has any follow-up questions or, wants to find out anything else, you can just email me. It's just jessicabattilana@gmail.com or through my website, which is jessicabattilana.com.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jessica. You have a great night, and thanks to your kiddos for making some appearances.
Yeah. I'm just glad they made those sort of appearances, not the like screaming or whining ones. You never know. You never know.
That's the beauty of the kids, right?
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Bye.